Evaluation Association.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so this webinar is a part of the GLocal Week. It's along with the Sri Lanka Evaluation Association. It is also with APEA, the Asia Pacific Evaluation Association. We also want to thank Ideas, Evaluate Sri Lanka, and the Center for Evaluation at the University of Sri Jayavardhana, and the Eval Faction campaign as well. Thank you. The discussion today will be very important for many of us. And I will moderate this session. The discussion, of course, is on a way forward. How do we improve based on the insights, the SDG monitoring and evaluation in Asia Pacific? I'm Anindita Sharma. I am in Singapore. It's 9 p.m. for me. And I run a company, consulting company in impact management. I represent the RI Institute in Asia Pacific. It's my pleasure to be here. My role is very simple. It's to promote a very robust conversation, to hear from our colleagues who are here today, and to raise your questions. There are practically no rules today except one. The one rule is please kindly make sure that you're muted and your videos are not switched on. This is for bandwidth issues. But of course, the whole purpose of this is engagement, so do chat with us. I'm keeping an eye on your chats. Send us your questions, your comments, your thoughts, and we will do our best to surface them to the speakers. So the only reminders are the muting and the video. And of course, we look forward to hearing from you through the chats and your comments. So please keep them coming. Our discussion today has an amazing panel. And so I would like to introduce them one by one. First, our discussant is Ms. Ada Ocampo, joining us from Peru, the president of Ideas. She is a very experienced evaluator. She is deeply involved in the work with Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm really very excited that she's here today because Ada has also spent many years in the Asia Pacific region. So it's particularly helpful to have her on the panel with us. I'm giving one reminder, I'm hearing some noises. So if somebody is not muted, kindly make sure that you are. Thank you very much. Now, who will present to us this report that we are going to look at today? And so there will be 3 speakers who will take us through the report, and I will introduce each of them to you now. There will be today Ms. Elberel Tumen-Jargal, a board member of the Asia Pacific Evaluation Association. There will be Ms. Maduka Lianagamage, co-leader of Evaluate Asia, and Ms. Dorothy May Albiento, also co-leader of Evaluate Asia. So welcome all 3 speakers. And to kick this session off, I would like to invite to the stage Mr. Randy Kademel, manager of APEA. Welcome.
Thank you, Anindita. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can, Randy.
Okay. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay. So as you all can see from this diagram, in 2020, APEA took the lead to develop the Asia Pacific Regional Evaluation Strategy. And one of the 8 themes of the Asia Pacific Regional Evaluation Strategy is using evaluation to report on SDGs. And this aims to promote the use of evidence when reporting to SDGs or more precisely in volunteer national reviews. Based on this study that we'll be presenting today was undertaken to examine the status of M&E practices on SDGs in selected countries in an important activity in order to promote the use of evidence when reporting to SDGs in the Asia Pacific region. Next slide. Okay, so y'all can see the report on this slide. So this study was conducted by the Using Evaluation or to Report on SDGs thematic group, part of the Asia Pacific Regional Evaluation Strategy of APEA, which I showed earlier. And so we have our lead author of this report was Anindita Sharma, and then we had Dorothy May, Madhuka Elbriel, who will present the study after me. So we will share a copy of this report right after our presentation, and I hope all of y'all will get the chance to read it. So the main objective of this study that was conducted was to determine the status of M&E practices for SDG implementation among countries in the Asia-Pacific region. And our presenters will talk about it more on the findings. Next slide. So in order to conduct this study, our team here came up with 3 research questions for this study. So the first research question was, what are the institutional frameworks and mechanisms in place to monitor and report progress on achieving the SDGs among countries in the Asia-Pacific? And the second research question was, what is the current practice of monitoring and evaluating the implementation of SDGs among countries in the Asia-Pacific? And final research question was, what are the gaps and what support is needed by countries to strengthen the monitoring and evaluation of SDGs in the Asia-Pacific? So these were the questions that was developed by our team in order to conduct this study. And now to talk more about the methodology we used and more about our findings, I pass it on to my teammate, Dorothy May Aldibiento. May, over to you.
Thank you so much, Randika. Can you confirm that you hear me well?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so good evening from Manila. So I am a member of the Using Evaluation to Report an SDGs team of the Asia Pacific Evaluation Association. Before I dive into the findings of our study, let me quickly share with you the methodology we used for the study. So we employed a mix of quantitative and qualitative data collection methods, primarily using a web-based survey and document review of VNRs to collect data on the experience, gaps, and support needed to monitor and evaluate the progress of SDGs implementation. With a total of 14 respondents for our survey, coming from 11 countries, as you can see on the map on the screen. More than half of our respondents were government officials from these 11 countries, and the rest were representatives from VOPES, academic institutions, and civil society organizations. So as you can see, we have a mix of respondent countries from different subregions in the Asia-Pacific region. Next slide, please. Okay, so data from our survey and desk review revealed 3 key insights on M&E of SDGs from our country respondents. While we do recognize the limitation in our sample, we still observe important findings that can help us chart the way forward towards strengthening SDGs M&E in our region. So let me just give you a brief overview of the key findings before my colleagues also delve into the more juicy details of the study. So first, there is a common commitment among the country respondents towards achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But it was interesting to see that this commitment has been adopted uniquely within the context of each country in terms of the type of policy frameworks and institutional mechanisms that were set up to ensure the monitoring and evaluation of SDGs implementation. Furthermore, we also found that the monitoring and evaluation of SDG implementation has a learning path. As we will see later in the presentations of Madhuka and Ebi, some countries are more advanced in their M&E policies and practices of SDGs compared to others, as we've also seen and observed in the VNRs we read. A question then that we ask ourselves from this finding is, why are some countries more mature than others? What can be gleaned from the experiences of more mature countries that can help accelerate the progress of other countries? Which takes us then to our third key finding. The most common challenge identified in monitoring and evaluation of SDGs implementation is around data. And this is connected to gaps in national frameworks and structures or mechanisms. We all know that high quality, timely, accurate, and sufficiently disaggregated data is critical in achieving SDGs. because it helps provide critical information and insights on the progress to help inform effective action steps to achieve our targets and goals. But these challenges point to the need for capacity development support, among others, to strengthen the monitoring and evaluation on SDGs to ensure the achievement of these goals by 2030. Next slide. Now let me go into more details about our first finding. So our study saw that all country respondents have actually adopted the UN SDGs. This signifies common commitment to achieve the 17 goals and 169 targets of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is also evident in the fact that all respondent countries have submitted at least one VNR, which will be discussed further later by Maduka. In our study, we took a step back to see whether countries already have existing national policy frameworks and mechanisms around monitoring and evaluation of public policies and programs in general, to see whether these were related in some way to the M&E of SDGs. So the table on the screen shows that all the 11 countries who responded to our survey already have established institutional frameworks for M&E, but in varying forms. For example, as you can see, countries like Japan, Kyrgyz Republic, and Mongolia have laws mandating M&E of public policies and programs, while Philippines and Sri Lanka, on the other hand, have national evaluation policy frameworks. In some countries as well, see that they do not have specific M&E policy frameworks, but are subsumed or embedded in other national policies in their countries. And aside from these existing policies, we also saw some countries like Bhutan, Nepal, Philippines, and Sri Lanka, who are also currently pushing for the passage of national evaluation policies and laws to help strengthen the monitoring and evaluation of their public policies and programs. Next slide. So then we come to policy frameworks aimed to realize the commitment to SDGs. Our desk review revealed that a common theme in the country's VNRs is the focus and emphasis on M&E of the progress on SDGs, meaning they do recognize the importance of having a robust M&E of the progress of a robust M&E framework to assess the impact of policy interventions and to make better informed policy decisions around achieving SDGs. Nonetheless, our studies show that while all are committed to achieving SDGs, each country charted their own paths, including in its monitoring and evaluation to achieve the goals. Just as you can see on the table on the screen, 5 of the 11 respondent countries have developed policy frameworks specifically around M&E of SDGs. And these are often tied with their national planning and or statistical agencies. So now I will pass on to Maduka to continue with the discussion of our second finding. Over to you, Maduka.
Thank you, May, and hello to everyone. So here in next few slides, I'll briefly tell you about the second finding of our study, that is M&E of SDGs implementation in the respondent countries. So before moving to the table here, I would like to briefly tell you some background information about VNRs. And as most of you know, 2015 UN Sustainable Development Summit led to the adoption of the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development, which is included 17 SDG goals and adopted by 193 UN member states. So as a part of follow-up review mechanism, 2030 Agenda encourage member states to conduct regular and inclusive review of progress of SDG implementation at the national levels and as well as subnational levels. So these countries-led and country-driven reviews known as voluntary national reviews or VNRs. So VNRs are presented in the annual high-level political forum every year, and that provide an opportunity for each country to share their experiences, success stories, challenges, and lessons learned with regards to the implementation of the SDGs. So as you can see here in the table, All the 11 countries which responded to our survey have submitted at least one VNR report after 2015 SDG summit. And as you can see here, Philippines and Indonesia have submitted 3 VNR reports by now, and all the other countries have submitted at least 1 or 2 VNR reports. And also we can see here, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Philippines submitted latest report in 2022, that means last year. Next slide, please. Okay, so each country has followed their own unique and country-specific mechanisms and strategies to monitor and evaluate SDG implementation. As an example, if we take Bhutan, they have developed a platform called SLEvA platform, which is an integrated dashboard to monitor gross national happiness, sustainable development goals, and their 5-year plan progress in Bhutan. And also, if we take 2021 VNR report of Japan, in order to evaluate progress of SDGs, they have included evaluation from private sector members, which they called it as SDGs promotion roundtable. So they have considered that it would be desirable to include evaluation of progress from other perspectives other than the governments. And also, when it comes to India, they have made a shift to a whole of society approach by engaging all key stakeholders, such as at the subnational and local governments and civil society, communities, and private sector in collaboration in adoption and also implementation and evaluation of the SDGs. So at the subnational level, states and districts drive the adoption of SDGs and targets, and also determine the local means of implementation and design the many frameworks in India. And also when it comes to Pakistan, one of the lessons learned from Millennium Development Goals of Pakistan was the absence of effective coordination mechanism and M&E and implementation frameworks in the country. So because of that, based on the VNR report 2022 of Pakistan, they have stated that at the top level parliamentary task forces and at the national, provincial and special areas, they are closely monitoring progress of the SDGs. And also we identify some trends in our study, such as one is less developed countries tend to focus more on SDGs which promote human rights, poverty alleviation, like that. But richer countries focus more on issues like the environment. And also our desk review of VNR reflected this as countries like Afghanistan focused on poverty alleviation, whereas Japan, the wealthiest of the countries represented in the sample, monitors the progress of all the SDGs. Also, based on the VNR review, we identify countries, collect and monitor data on all the SDGs. But when it comes to reporting, they report and narratives only focus on priority SDGs depending on country development priorities in that particular time period. Next slide, please. So our survey findings indicate that all 11 countries have dedicated public institutions mandated to monitor SDG implementation. And the task of monitoring is often under the national planning department of the country. And many countries, they have incorporated the SDGs in the 5-year national development plan, such as in the case of Bhutan and the Philippines. Next slide. Certainly, on our survey results show that there is a higher frequency of monitoring SDGs implementation in these countries compared to evaluating the SDG implementation. As you can see here in the table, it shows frequency of annual monitoring is 50%, whereas frequency of annual evaluation is 30%. Now, my friend Elbera will explain you more on finding 3, and thank you. Over to you, Abby.
Thank you. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I'm Elbert from the FPA. So I will introduce or present the findings for this study. And the third finding is more about the data challenges and the need for the capacity building support. So with the open-ended questions, we asked the respondents about what are the main challenges faced by the M&E specialists in their countries. So the first one is more about the data collection and reporting. The second one is about the mainstreaming at the subnational levels. So as stated in the UN Economics and Social Commissions for Asia and the Pacific's progress report, our region is still lagging behind the other regions and not on track to achieve any of the 17 SDGs, especially only the 47% of all SDG indicators have insufficient data. So it shows that we need to gather data and for measuring our progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Regarding the first one is about the data collection. So as reported by our respondents, that the most common challenge reported was the lack of high quality data. So due to the lack of data culture, especially in the developing countries, a lack of knowledge of and the ability to utilize the data for SDG reporting is becoming the main challenge facing those countries. So without available data, it's unable to measure the progress realistically and use it for the effective decision making, which will contribute to the achievement of the SDG targets on time. So the second one is about the mainstreaming at the subnational levels. So the government and non-government organizations at the subnational levels play the key role, and they are directly responsible for the actions required for achieving Sustainable Development Goals, such as the provision of basic services like health, education, water, and sanitation. However, those subnational stakeholders are not familiar with the M&E of the SDGs in general, especially the commitments are generally weak among them. So moreover, there are other related challenges in resource mobilization, data management, and coordination among them as well. So those challenges hinders the possibility of navigating the implementation of SDG, both at the national and subnational levels. So next slide, please. So to wrap up our findings, that there are three main findings. The first one is more about the national M&E framework. So all countries represented by our survey respondents have adopted the UN SDG targets, and they have their own national evaluation frameworks, but they are designed differently and implemented in multiple ways. For example, as a way of implementing policies or just enacting a laws on that. So moreover, it's shown that the countries represented in our study take an approach based to their context. So it was very unique and things to consider for the further actions to be taken for developing M&E frameworks for in their countries. So the second finding was more about the implementation of the SDG, M&E of the SDG. So regarding the M&E of the SDG is a learning path for all countries. So depending on the development of the countries, that some countries have already submitted the WNRs twice or 3 times, but some countries have just submitted once. So it means that on development and promoting the WNR and development of the M&E framework of the SDG is quite crucial in countries to track their progress. So the third one is about the building capacity of specialists, M&E specialists, and government and civil staffs to gather data and use the evidence for the SDG implementation. So especially that, as stated in the target 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals, the improving the availability of high quality data and building on existing initiatives to develop measurement of the progress on Sustainable Development Goals and supporting the statistical capacity building in developing countries are quite crucial to make a progress in this field. So therefore, developing the strengthening the skills, abilities, and processes and resources that the organizations and communities needs to measure their progress and utilize the evidence for their decision-making is needed for encouraging local people and local communities to take action to promote the M&E of the SDGs. Next slide, please. So based on the findings that our study team has developed several recommendations, but it could be enriched by your feedback and recommendations as well. So our main finding shows that there is a demand for the knowledge and experience sharing platforms because the countries lack in this field. So accordingly, we suggest that creating platforms, organizing forums, and establishing mechanisms could be effective for promoting M&E for the SDGs. So as a main unit in each country, that WPS could take the lead to assist the government and non-government or civil society organizations or institutions in charge of M&E of the SDG in building their capacity on evaluation and webinars. So moreover, conducting the comparative studies that the similarity that we have conducted could be of help to enrich the evidence in this field, especially that we could track the change in the practice of M&E of SDGs among the multi-stakeholders, not just including the public staff, but also the representatives from the private organization and civil society organization could be crucial to get the different insights on this field. Moreover, that gathering the qualitative data, such as the conducting focus group discussions or conducting case studies among those countries, could help determine the type of needs and the gaps and challenges they are facing to implement the M&E for the SDGs. Thank you. Next slide. So we also asked the people's respondents' expectations from the PIA as a main regional organization. So when we ask about the expected support from the PIA to increase the use of monitoring and evaluation of SDGs implementation in their countries, most respondents expressed the following 4 types of needs. The first one is more about the knowledge sharing. So the first one is one of them could be organizing webinars on SDGs, M&E for capacity development and knowledge sharing among the different countries and organizations, especially that promoting existing good practices and adopting it to their practice is crucial for them. Moreover, our respondents are willing to strengthen their national M&E systems through the review of other institutional arrangements, policies, and processes in other countries. Therefore, knowledge sharing platforms and opportunities for sharing their experience would be great benefit to them. The second one is more about the capability building. So the providing training and developing the curriculum on M&E for SDGs. So also the SDG focused courses should be made available to the not only government officials, but also the other stakeholders from the private sectors and also civil society organization who will be working and who will be monitoring the SDG implementation. And many respondents also emphasized that the crucial need to mainstream the SDGs at the local level and improve the M&E frameworks of SDGs at the subnational levels. Third one is about the creating and nurturing the community of practice for SDG M&E, especially that it will be of help to promote the M&E culture among the multi-stakeholders at both at the national and the local levels in different countries. Therefore, respondents expected the PIA to take the lead to assist not only government institutions in charge of M&E, but also other stakeholders from different organizations. Also, it could be implemented through the national association WPS by bringing the regional expertise and support for other countries and develop their capabilities in parallel. So because those needs align with the priority of the PIA, that respondents expect the PIA to continue playing a role in bringing a knowledge sharing and capacity development to SDG implementation in countries in the Asia-Pacific region. So those are the expectations from our respondents, but you could ask more about the conclusions, and you could also suggest other solutions to the issues as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Abby, Madhuka, and May for taking us through your findings, the 3 findings, your 5 recommendations, and 4 proposed action steps for APIA. I would now like to invite our discussant, Ms. Ada Ocampo, to the stage to share their views. Thank you.
Thanks very, very much. I would like to thank you, the organizers, for this opportunity and to congratulate all the parties involved in such a wonderful study. I think it has very important findings, very enlightening ways to look at the future, and also it can become a very important point of departure for other regions that would like to do similar initiatives. I have only 8 minutes, and I would like to focus on the third objective of the study, which is looking at the future. I would like, before I go to that, to highlight the fact that the study is pointing out several positive aspects as well as challenges. But in the positive aspects, I would like to highlight that mostly we see a commitment from countries, a general commitment to report on the progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. There are different arrangements, different challenges, but overall there is a positive commitment, and I think there is momentum we need to build upon. The crises of our times are still there, but at least we are getting out of the COVID pandemic that triggered a humanitarian crisis worldwide. So I would like to start with the first point. If we go to the next slide, please, I have 6 points. I call it the relevance of striking a good balance between technical and political aspects. And this is something I reflected from experience and also through reading the study and reading the recommendations and the big responsibilities that APEA is holding now, looking at the future. So I think this balance is important. Not all the needs are technical. We need first to trigger a decision to evaluate the SDGs, and this decision is political rather than technical. It is a political decision with technical implications and not the other way around. Let's go to the next, please. In this vein, when it comes to the question, for example, imagine that we have to support a country for an evaluation of the SDGs, the first question we have to ask whether the political decision has been taken or not yet. In most countries, there is a will from different actors to undertake an evaluation, but the political decision has not yet been taken. But this is the first step then. The first step is political, not technical, is to trigger the decision to evaluate the SDGs. Technical aspects will come as a consequence. Therefore, for this stage, political dialogue is key. And evaluators, as well as all other actors, have a role to play in promoting, supporting, advocating for such a political dialogue that will lead to the decision to evaluate the SDGs. Next, please. We have heard that there is a need for capacity development, that there is appetite for capacity development, and also there is a commitment from BOPES and other organizations to provide such an important capacity development activities. However, when it comes to strategies and activities towards evaluation, capacity development, including training, including dissemination, knowledge production, exchange of experiences, peer support, etc., we have also to take into account that these activities will have both political and technical dimensions and not only one. So we have moved from a political dialogue that is the first step, that is mainly political, to the next step after the decision has been taken, where we have to look at both political and technical aspects together. And I have put two examples. For example, the question on how to generate, promote, or support a political dialogue leading to the decision to evaluate the SDGs has two components. The political, because it is important to identify those policy decision makers that will actually have the capacity to decide, to allocate resources of different kind, financial, technical, etc., and that will be the ongoing support for the evaluation to happen. And we will also need the technical aspects to ensure that what are the technical implications, what are the type of capacity needed, etc., are discussed and are answered in that political dialogue. The second example is a question: what are the necessary actions to ensure the use of evidence proceeding from the evaluation? We are going now to a final step of the evaluation when the report has been completed, and there is a need to ensure the use of the evidence, of the findings, of the recommendations. How can we do that? There is a political dimension on this as well. We have to come together, the different actors, to demonstrate why these recommendations are or should be influential, how they can inform policy decision making. And here the principles of the agenda come on board in a very explicit way. They should come throughout the evaluation, but in a very explicit way. To what extent the recommendations will aim to better and more fair public policies, for example, to what extent they will reduce the gap between those will reduce the inequity gaps, to what extent they will ensure that no one will be left behind, etc. Next, please. Fourth is the importance of targeting, for the duplication, targeting both policy and decisions makers as well as evaluators when approaching capacity development, training, knowledge products. This is very much linked to the previous one. But when we target policy makers, for example, for training or elaborating knowledge products, we need to have a different language, a language that is more friendly, that have policy pointers, and it's not that technical. So we should differentiate on the needs and roles of the various actors when it comes to capacity development, especially training and knowledge products. We need, policymakers need knowledge products that will help them adopt decisions, and therefore things that they will easily understand, that will easily read, that practically are including policy pointers, whereas people that will need to support the actual evaluation processes will need more technical aspects to ensure that the evaluation is going to be robust, is going to be sound, and fundamentally, it's going to be influential. Thank you. The next, please. The importance of differentiating the M from the E. In the report, I have read that many times M&E is used as a recurrent acronym, as it happened throughout the world. M&E is actually a frequently used acronym, and in theory, but only in theory, it means monitoring and evaluation. In practice, it mostly refers to monitoring only. So we should not just use the acronym unless we unpack it. And we unpack it and unfold what the M and the E means, both of them, in the context where we are using the acronym. VNRs, for example, voluntary national reviews, describe and analyze monitoring activities when they refer to M&E. Very, very rarely, very, very infrequently, VNR report about evaluations and are informed about informed by evidence from evaluations. Therefore, when we read in a VNR M&E, we should just ask the question to what extent they are referring to both M and E. Monitoring and evaluation are complementary, albeit distinct functions. So look at them carefully and see to what extent the M&E is referring to only monitoring. Next, please. And this is the last but not least. Related to this M&E and to what extent VNRs are reporting on evaluation, there is a recognition that actually that is a gap and that is a challenge. And because of that, a group of countries led by Nigeria have recently promoted a UN resolution that was adopted in the General Assembly on 26 April 2023, just recently, that was adopted without a vote. The title of the resolution is Strengthening Voluntary National Reviews through Country-Led Evaluations of the SDGs. This tells about the importance of strengthening voluntary national reviews with evidence that will tell about we are achieving the SDGs with equity while leaving no one behind in a very sustainable way or not. We have to take into account the spirit of the agenda and not just reporting about goals and targets. The link to the resolution is there, and then I go to the last one. Next slide, please. And the other is the importance of further highlighting the difference between and complementarities between VNRs and SDGs evaluations. And this new resolution will help a lot. It proposes challenges as well, because now we not only need to promote country-led evaluations, but we also need to help countries to include the evidence from evaluations in their voluntary national reviews and not to state, as many countries stated during the discussion of these resolutions, that VNRs are evaluations in themselves. They are not. They are complementary, but the VNRs without evaluations are not as robust and as evidence-based as they should be. And this goes to the very last point. It's important for us as BOPEs, as evaluators, as people committed with SDGs to further explore the extent to which a VNR is evidence-based or not. This can help in the design of future activities related to technical assistance, training, etc., for more robust and evidence-based voluntary national reviews. So thank you very, very much. Again, congratulations, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important webinar.
Thank you, Ada. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and thanks again to everybody who presented. On the chat, I'm observing a few comments. Some I understand have been around how robust are the recommendations given the number of respondents, etc. So I would like to just very quickly go to May, perhaps, and open up very quickly. May, would you like to comment to it? I know you responded back on the chat. Would you like to just comment further on that?
Are you referring to give more details to these comments?
Yes, yeah. I think May had a comment. So May, if you can hear me, could you just jump in and just speak it out?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was actually talking to May, Dorothy May Albiento. I could hear you, by the way, Jinendra, but since May had something to say, but I'm not hearing from May. Okay, Jinendra, why don't you go ahead very quickly since you raised the question.
Hello, I think
May. Okay. No worries. Go ahead, May.
Disconnected. Can you repeat the? Can you repeat the
question?
Yes,
I just wanted to give you a chance to ask you very quickly because you commented, responded back to Jinendra's question, comment on the robustness of the recommendations. Would you just like to quickly add to it, and then maybe we can go to the other questions?
Yes. So as I replied to Janendra's comment in the chat, we do recognize the limitations of the study that we did, and you can see this explicitly stated in the report as well. So we really saw that there was indeed selection bias, and we had a very small sample to begin with, and so this really had a lot to do with some limitations of our study. But we had tried to address some of these limitations by doing triangulation. So all of the questions that we asked in the survey, we did also check and cross-check these using the VNRs and some other documents from reports from each country. So all of these were validated by either of the desk review and the survey responses from our respondents. So I guess moving forward, we had really hoped that this study would really be a conversation starter for M&E of SDGs in our region, because we haven't seen a lot of studies that have delved into the practice of M&E of SDGs in our region. So we had hoped that this would be that conversation starter. So we hadn't really thought about it as like a big study. And moving forward, I think we have a lot to do if we do this survey again. And we learned a lot as well as we did this study. And I hope that if we ever do this study, any recommendations from your end, you can share those in the chat, and we can also take note of that, which we can consider if we ever do a next round of this study. And hopefully, again, we hope, as Yatin also mentioned in the chat, we really want to have more countries participating in the study moving forward, because the more countries who respond to this study, the more we learn and make generalizations of what the practice really is around M&E of SDGs in our region. So for a start, I think we just wanted to start this conversation around this very important topic.
Thank you, May. There are a couple more comments in the chat around the role of a PI. We'll come to that. I actually would very much like to go to Ada and ask you, Ada, your perspective was about the dimensions of politics and technicals. And with your, in your experience, where are you seeing this being done better, perhaps? And who can we in the region potentially look up to learn from?
Oh, thanks very much for the question. I can actually put two examples. One example, for example, relates to how to initiate an evaluation is Nigeria example when after a training, the Director General of Strategic Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation of the Ministry of Planning was in the training. He decided that to evaluate the SDGs is going to be a good idea. Together with UNICEF, with the BOPE, and with other actors, what they decided to do is to touch base with high-level government officials, especially the Office of the SDGs, which is a special office that is in the organigram of the presidency, which is very high level. So they decided to reach this office, and for doing that and for convincing them, they decided to organize a seminar with them where there were some explanations about what difference an evaluation of the SDGs would make, why is it important for the country. And after this dialogue, the Office of the Presidency decided to support the idea. For this, well, there were also some other partners participating, and for this, there were several principles that were established in light of the principles of the agenda. For example, that in order to decide what to evaluate, a participatory process will take place. There was a workshop in Lagos, in the city of Lagos, 3 days workshop, where different government officials were invited. BOPER, representatives of some NGOs, and some international partners to discuss together what would be the priorities in terms of what to evaluate. The lead role was of the government, but the others were playing different support roles as well. And there is a process that has been documented on how SDGs were prioritized and therefore after discussed. And now there are 2 evaluations of the SDGs, and they are also informing some public policies. This is one example I want to focus on how it was initiated. The other example is actually Finland. There are many examples. There is actually Finland when the decision to evaluate was taken by the Prime Minister after a lot of steps. It was decided that it has to be on time to input the elections. So the report was done in a way that it was released when the political campaigns of the political parties had started and were in motion. And there were several recommendations by the country, and they started disseminating the recommendations and saying what important would be that the next government would take into account the recommendations. What that triggered is that the political parties decided to take the recommendations, the evaluations, and added them to their political campaigns. And they said that if they win the elections, they commit to undertake the recommendations. And that's what actually happened, because there was already a commitment and there was a lot of pressure to do that. So when these political aspects are included, there is more possibilities that things will go in a different in the direction that they should go, because it's not only about supporting countries, it's not only that, it's also taking the spirit of the agenda, that no one should be left behind, that the equity gaps should be reduced, that all public policies should be sustainable, etc., etc. And for this, we need to incorporate the principles of the agenda in all the actions we take. So incorporating different actors since the inception, through the implementation and through the use of evaluation as well. And those are political decisions that are, I would say, they are interacting with the technical aspects throughout. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those very powerful examples. I think that gives us a lot to think about. I would say I'm just going to do a time check. We have about 8 minutes before we close it. So I want to go to one of the questions we have here, and this is from Karin, asking, do you have data around how adequate the government's funding levels for appropriate M&E activities, and especially for disaggregated data? Could this be an area for further advocacy? Okay, so this is to the team that presented. Would one of you like to address this question?
Sure, I can. Yeah, so the study didn't cover funding requirements or funding allocations to do the M&E of SDGs, but I think that's something that we can also consider in a possible next study. So if we ever do a study again, we can add that component into one of the questions, so we can see how countries allocate and how much they allocate funds for these types of activities. So we can definitely take those for the next study that we can do.
Wonderful. Thank you, Man. Thank you, Karin, for the questions. So thanks, everybody, for the questions that have come through. In the interest of time, despite this being a very, very, very deep topic, which deserves far more time than what we have here today, in the interest of time, we will keep moving ahead. And just FYI, for anybody who has yet to see the report, please, you can scan the QR code, or there is a link right there. So I'm going to keep it up there for 30 or less, maybe 10 seconds or so. Please go ahead and download the reports if you haven't. And please continue to interact with us. Send us your thoughts, your questions, your ideas, your suggestions, and we will look into those. There was another question about the slides, etc. And I think you can expect follow-ups afterwards on that. All right. We will send this QR code later as well. And then one request is a group picture. So what I'm going to do is, I think for the group picture, I may just, I have to ask someone who's technically more proficient than me. Am I supposed to stop sharing for the group picture? Randika?
It's fine,
Yeah, you can,
Anita. So
yeah.
Okay, so for the group picture, please switch on your videos and we'll just go ahead and take a group picture.
okay, so let's just wait for others to open their cameras. So we can have a good group photo that we can also share with the G local team to show that these are the people who came to listen to our webinar. So a couple more seconds for others to join in for our group photo. Okay, and then if you could just show me those smiles now so I can take a photo. Thank you. Keep them for a couple of minutes. Let me do the second. Look into the camera, please. One more. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's just keep moving. And now for the closing remarks, I would love to invite Ms. Janet Olatundun Adelegan, who is a visiting professor at Aalto University School of Business in Finland. Janet, please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hanidita. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, because I think I'm connected with two devices. So,
Janet, we can hear you, but please mute one and we can hear you through the other.
yeah, I think I've muted. Okay. Hello, is it better now?
Perfect. Go ahead.
I switched off one. Maybe I disconnect from one so that.
It's good. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Hanidita, and thank you, colleagues at the APPEAR for this excellent reports on using evaluation to report on SDG. When I was just reflecting on this, I was thinking that I'm actually very qualified to give this vote of thanks. This is on a lighter mood for three reasons. Currently, I'm in Finland, where the World Circular Economy Forum is taking place. And Finland, in the ranking of SDG, has achieved the first ranking in the last couple of years. I don't know for how many years, including 2023. Finland has 86.51% in achieving the 17 SDGs. So imagine as number one in the country that is making the headway in fulfilling SDG. I'm also from Nigeria, and I've seen Nigeria being mentioned many times as the country that sponsored at the UN level on how evaluation should be used to report SDG. And for that, I'm very proud of that. And recently, in the last couple of months, I moved to Asia. I live in Singapore. So I'm also, sort of qualified to be part of this group. And then I joined the SDG group, which is the group that prepared this report. And I had the privilege of reading through the reports after it was produced almost immediately. So on this, I want to congratulate those who have prepared this report. This is, for blazing the trail on using evaluation to report on SDG. And I hope that this study will bring about more studies on this topic, which is very topical, and that this will help us to be able to move forward in achieving more SDG on the pathway to have a better future that we all desire. Because our desire is to have a sustainable future where all of us can be happy and proud, and where there can be not only equality, but there can be equity, and everyone can live happily in the world. So on this note, I want to thank everyone who has come to attend this webinar. I want to thank you for the stimulating reports and the discussion that has come out of this. And I hope we're going to continue to discuss this, and even after we are done with this webinar.
Thank you,
so
Janet. Thank you so much. And that brings us right at the top of the hour. So we are going to officially close. For those of you who want to know what's coming up next, the next webinar is on the 28th of June with Sri Lanka Evaluation and APIA. Please join this if you would so like to. We have a workshop on 8th of June, which is a follow-up training for winter school practitioners. And most importantly, we have our conference, the APIA conference, coming up 4 to 7 December in Manila. So save the date, we will see you there. And also just a FYI, the Winter School for Young and Emerging Evaluators will be also held at the same time. So we would love to see you participate in as many of these forums as you can. Please keep asking questions, giving us suggestions and comments. And thank you everybody that was here today, spoke up today, and will continue to engage with us or listen to us. Thank you again. We will close this session now.
Thank you, everyone.